Progressives in the House have blocked a $1 billion funding provision for Israel's Iron Dome. This was meant to be part of the stopgap bill that is meant to keep the government funded through December 3rd. It's unclear how the $1 billion provision for Israel was included in that. Typically, that type of provision is included in the National Defense Authorization Act. But in this case, progressives stood their ground and they said, no, we are not going to vote in favor of this legislation unless it is stripped of the provision offering additional funding to Israel for its Iron Dome. Ryan Nobles tweeted that a little bit of drama with the Dem passage of the CR/debt ceiling in the House. A group of progressives had told leadership they will not vote if the bill or for the bill if it includes a $1 billion provision in funding for Israel's Iron Dome. The flap has led to Rules Committee to go into recess. At that point, Pramila Jayapal, who is the head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, had a lengthy meeting with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And how did that meeting end? Well, the Iron Dome funding has been removed from the CR/debt limit bill. Now, for those who are concerned about continuing the funds for Israel, just note that it is likely that the amount of money will be approved in the defense spending bill in 2022, as is always the case with the National Defense Authorization Act. Representative Josh Gottheimer, a leading centrist in the Democratic Party, expressed frustration that the Iron Dome funding was being removed, but stopped short of threatening to vote against the bill. Also, a spokesperson for the House Appropriations Committee, Chairwoman Rosa DeLauro, said that funding for the Iron Dome will be included in the final bipartisan and bicameral defense funding bill later this year. And I just want to note that progressives have a lot less leverage when it comes to the defense spending bill, because that is one piece of legislation that has overwhelming bipartisan support. In this case, Nancy Pelosi could not lose the progressive votes necessary to pass the stopgap legislation because, of course, Republicans are going to vote against it. In a defense spending bill where, of course, Republicans overwhelmingly support it, progressives are going to have less leverage. So it would be certainly unlikely that they would be able to block that spending in the Defense Authorization Act.
Okay, so I want to get to the substance of Iron Dome in a second, but first I want to go to DC assumptions. So how did the media and politicians react to the progressives having real power for the first time, literally in my lifetime? Not well. So here's a tweet from Heather Cagle with Politico. She writes, "The votes aren't there," one senior Dem told me. There's now some finger pointing going on about whose fault this was. Now look at the assumption built into that reporter's tweet. Progressives won, so there must have been something terribly wrong, and people are trying to figure out whose fault is it. Now, progressives standing up and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't give endless money to Israel's military in particular, as they do an illegal occupation of Palestine decade after decade against international law and human decency. And Washington reacts to that with, oh my God, something went wrong. Somebody was being humane and actually cared about policy. And so we got to figure out who's at fault here. Okay, so now if you're saying, hey, look, Iron Dome protects civilians, I've said on the show tons of times, I'm thrilled that Israel has Iron Dome. I want their civilians protected. They're our brothers and sisters. Now, I'm going to say something revolutionary that would never be considered in Washington. I think the Palestinians should also have Iron Dome. And that's what, of course, everybody wants to go, but then how would we murder them? Well, I don't want you to murder them. I don't want anybody killing Israeli civilians. I also don't want anybody killing Palestinian civilians. And yes, if you don't live in America, that is considered a radical and revolutionary thought here. If I worked at a mainstream media outlet, I would likely be fired for saying that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
So now, this particular funding for Iron Dome, we've already given billions upon billions upon billions of dollars to Iron Dome. I honestly don't know why we're giving another $1 billion. My guess is it ain't really going to Iron Dome, it's going towards the occupation.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's relevant context to this story, because of course you have conservatives in the Republican Party and of course conservatives in the Democratic Party with their minds exploding over this today, acting as if this is nothing more than an anti-Semitic gesture, that the United States should be protecting Israel at any and all costs, that we're abandoning our allies in Israel. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the amount of funding that's already been allocated to Israel in the form of military funding, it's really questionable why there needed to be a provision in this stopgap measure to provide additional funding to Israel. So for instance, in 2016, the Obama administration approved a $38 billion military aid package to Israel, okay? Also, if you take a look at this handy little chart that was put together by the Congressional Research Service and published by the BBC, US aid commitments to Israel have actually increased quite a bit. So we have commitments up until 2028, and you can see that it's in the tens of billions of dollars. I mean, it's been in the tens of billions of dollars since the 1990s, but the number has increased to close to $40 billion. As I mentioned, there's the $38 billion military aid package that was committed to by the Obama administration. Then you look at the amount of money that was allocated to Israel in the form of military spending or funding just last year during the pandemic. So of the $3.8 billion given to Israel in 2020, 50 million of that was used for missile defense. I'm sorry, 500 million of that was used for missile defense, including investments in Israel's Iron Dome and other systems which can intercept incoming rockets. So yeah, I mean, look, it is fascinating because Obama had a pretty shaky relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu when he was serving as prime minister in Israel. And part of the reason why was because Obama was willing to say once or twice that, hey, maybe you should stop building settlements. Maybe you should stop, fueling the ongoing violence and tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. And Netanyahu was furious at those statements and continued to build the settlements, continued with the occupation. And so Obama went ahead and approved the funding anyway. It wasn't a problem.
No, Obama was all talk, no walk. He didn't actually do anything to Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a despotic right-wing leader of Israel who continued the brutal occupation, launched several attacks against the Palestinians that killed thousands of civilians in mass. Tons of children were killed in those attacks, and Obama gave Netanyahu everything he wanted, but every once in a while he would say, "Pretty please, can you stop the settlements?" And Netanyahu would say, "No, shut up." And he would go and speak in front of the House or in Congress, and they would all give him a standing ovation, including Democrats, in a contravention of what Obama theoretically wanted. So the only thing Obama did that Netanyahu was not in favor of was that he did a deal with Iran. And Netanyahu was like, "Why do I have to ask you twice? I already ordered you to attack Iran. Why aren't you attacking Iran?" Now, good news, America not controlled by Israel, because we did not attack Iran, okay? So keep it real on what is actually happening, both the corruption in politics and the things that it leads to, like the enormous aid package to Israel, but also the limits of that. Don't get into any conspiracy theories or nonsense. So now, let's look at the numbers one last time. $38 billion, did you run out of it? Why do you need another billion? So you said a $500 million of the $3.8 billion from last year went to Iron Dome. So why don't you use another $500 million? We already gave you $3.8 billion last year. Why do you need another $1 billion? And if you're gonna get $1 billion, can we give the Palestinians $1 billion as well? Again, that's where Washington would go, this guy's crazy. Of course we are not gonna give Palestinians money, they're Muslims. Oh no, I said it out loud. Okay, now they won't add that last part. They never explain though why the Palestinians are subhuman and should be treated 100% differently than the Israelis. They just fall back on nonsense talking points like Israel is the only democracy in the region. It doesn't mean anything. First of all, what do you mean the region? Turkey's a democracy. Second of all, it's not really a democracy if you're occupying several million people and giving them no rights whatsoever. That's not at all a democracy. In fact, that's racism. That's saying democracy for me, but not democracy for you. That's just a fact. If it makes people uncomfortable, they should really look at themselves in the mirror and figure out what's wrong with them. And by the way, Josh Gottheimer is in no way a moderate. He's an absolute right-wing Democrat. But the press, in order to do them a favor, a public relations favor, calls deeply right-wing Democrats moderates to make them look good. And finally, look, there's a lot of you guys celebrating in our member section, and you should be. So Tina wrote in, woohoo, the squad strikes again. The corporate Dems effed around and found out. And Little Mac McChee says, is today going to be a too strong show for the establishment? Does being a TYT member make us heroes that are too strong? I guess, he says jokingly. But seriously, guys, the reason I read that is because you are heroes. So if you volunteered or you gave a small dollar donation or you voted for any of these progressives, these Justice Democrats that we asked you to support and to believe in and to have faith in, well, it was not a perfect road at all. A lot of them lost, but enough of them won. And even after they won, it was not a perfect road. But here we are.
Yeah.
They're exercising real power for the first time in my life. And yes, you guys did that. You weren't alone, but you were important. And so if you were involved in helping these folks get to where they are, thank you for bringing a tiny bit of sanity to Washington. As Anna explained, it'll probably get washed away in the tide in this particular case.
Yeah, because of the bipartisan nature of the defense spending bill, unfortunately.
You're right, and right now, of course, the corporate media is all screaming at Democrats.
Right.
What's wrong with you? You are not following directions. Get back to the right wing. Get back to the right wing, right?
Right.
They're, by the way, the same media who will then later turn around and say, hey, can we help the average American maybe get rid of student debt? They'll say, how are you gonna pay for that? We gave it to Israel already, and by the way, other wealthy allies. Turkey, for example, where I'm from originally, is a top 20 economy. Why do we give them any money? Israel is a perfectly wealthy ally. Why do we give them $38 billion? I understand why we would give it to Nicaragua or Honduras, et cetera, so we stop immigration. That helps us, that helps them. It's a Marshall Plan, et cetera. But for countries that are already perfectly wealthy and can defend themselves and have more weapons than all of their neighbors combined, it makes no sense for us to subsidize it, except for the corporate media and the corporate politicians that support it. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.